Welcome to the Regen Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Susan Buckwalter, who is one of the co-founders of Recoup. Recoup is an all-natural ginger-powered hydration beverage with regenerative organic maple water as its lead ingredient. And Recoup is the first beverage brand to be Regenerative Organic Certified across its entire product portfolio. In this episode, we learn about Susan's co-founder Siwat and the homemade health remedies that inspired Recoup's creation. Susan spends time teaching us about the hydration and wellness power combo of maple water and ginger. Plus, we take a deep dive into all things branding, marketing, and merchandising for not only Recoup's products, but for regenerative brands at large. This was a super fun episode with Susan, y'all, and we hope you enjoy it as much as I'm about to enjoy a lemon lime flavored Recoup. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Super excited today to have Susan from Recoup joining us. So welcome, Susan.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. It's great to have you on. I was lucky enough to recently try Recoup for the first time, thanks to Siwat, Susan. And it's a fantastic product. So we're looking forward to learning more about it and sharing that story with the audience. So for those who are unfamiliar with Recoup, give us a quick high level lay of the land. What do you produce? Why do you make it? Where can people find it today?
Sure. We have an organic hydration and health beverage, which has a clinically proven dose of ginger that supports muscle recovery, digestion, and immunity. So a great beverage to drink after a workout, first thing in the morning to kind of get you back at your best self. And we're 3 flavors right now. So they all have ginger, but watermelon, blood orange, pineapple, coconut, and lemon lime. And those are available on Amazon. We have a variety pack as well as our individual flavors on Amazon Prime. And then we're in over 100 stores in the New York metro area and in several places out west where I am right now. So we're bi-coastal, which is what all the cool kids are these days.
Nice. Two things I want to follow up on there. One, watermelon blood orange is fantastic. It's my favorite out of the 3. And then 2, you mentioned the clinical dose of ginger. I'm curious, what is a clinical dose of ginger?
Sure. So ginger is one of those ingredients that most people know, ginger is good for me. But there's actually, there are over 100 medical studies on the benefits of ginger, and it ranges from post-workout muscle recovery, so delayed onset muscle soreness, if you're aware. Ginger helps alleviate DOMS, yes. Help with nausea, pregnancy-related nausea, surgery, chemo-related nausea, and sort of digestion in general, and helping your body process what you eat. So there's a range of benefits, and most of the studies use around 2 teaspoons of pressed ginger juice or an equivalent that's a dried powder or something like that. And so we use that amount. And one of the cool things about ginger is that when you heat it, it doesn't denature. It's not like a fruit juice that you lose the flavor and you lose the nutrients. The properties in ginger, which are gingerols and chagols, are actually more potent when they're heated, and they turn into a different form of the molecule that has just as many, if not additional benefits. So we flash heat the product to sterilize it, and in the process, we don't compromise the ginger at all.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, wow, we could spend a lot of time on that. I feel like I went through a little ginger era myself, where I was making a ginger-based stir fry for a year straight for lunch and dinner, because It is amazing. I am personally a lemon lime guy. The blood orange is phenomenal as well, but lemon lime is my favorite because we used to have lemon lime Gatorade when I was growing up all the time, and I love that flavor. And this, to me, was the better version of that, right? It tasted amazing, but I didn't feel like shit afterwards, like I probably used to with the lemon lime Gatorade. And
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you go do a yoga session or a nice workout, you don't want to fill your body with 27 grams of sugar afterwards. So having something that's no added sugar and organic is just feels so much better.
And we We know that the origin story is a deeply personal one for Siwat. We're bummed he couldn't join us, but we know you can step in and hopefully share that with our crew, Susan, of just what happened with Siwat's journey and why did this beverage come about?
Of course, yeah. So really incredible story, and that's one of the things when I met Siwat, endeared me to him and really gave me an insight into how passionate he was about this. So he spent the first 3 years of his life in the hospital. He had 10 major surgeries before he was 12 years old. And so he was very much a kid who was kind of always going through something and always going through needing recovery. And his mother is Thai. They moved to the States and had him and would make these ginger-based home remedies. And so when he was little and when he was, sort of as he was growing up and going through these surgeries, including open heart surgery, he would have these ginger recipes afterwards and they help with his digestion and actually with the kind of muscle soreness and aches of going through surgery and coming out of that. So that was always a big part of his journey and his recovery. He actually went on, he's so impressive. He got a master's in physiology from Columbia, and he was working in the same hospital that he grew up in New York Presbyterian Hospital, and working with kids and with heart and lung disease. I know, just gives me chills.
Rock star.
Yeah, and he was thinking I wish I could take my mom's recipe and help these kids with some of the issues that they're going through that I went through as well. And so he always had it in the back of his mind. He ended up going on and getting his MBA from Cornell, and then was working at a healthcare startup accelerator and was in the startup world, had started some things and thought, this would be really incredible if I could bring this product to market. So that's when I met him, that's what he was doing. He had created it in his home. He bought a juicer. He did 20 different recipes and invited friends over to try them. And, from there kind of workshop down to a few recipes, was getting it produced in a small commercial kitchen and was selling it, just trying to focus on hospitals. But as he was going around and selling it, his friends were like, "Hey, can I get some of that? Where can I buy it?" And he realized there was a broader appeal.
Wow. Yeah, and as somebody who has spent some time in hospitals and been in chemo centers, I know that the food that they serve there isn't necessarily cutting edge innovation for health. Right. In fact, it's ironically quite the opposite. I know my time in chemo centers, I wish they would have had products like Recoup there, because instead they have apples wrapped in plastic, Chips Ahoy, Nabisco, Nestle, all the worst foods you can imagine, which is insane. So I really just want to call that out and give Siwat credit for what he was trying to accomplish, and at the same time acknowledge the uphill battle he was trying to fight. Because it is not an easy place to build a brand.
And that's what we learned. And so when I met him, so I went to Cornell as well for my MBA, but we were in different programs. And so a mutual friend connected us and said, this guy's got a great product. He could use some branding help. That was my background. I was working in Unilever and EOS products in the branding and innovation space. And so I met with him a few times and just, it was a great product, but the market wasn't the right target, just in terms of being able to scale and being able to reach that consumer. I mean, you can't advertise on Facebook to people going through some of those medical issues. That's private information, right? So it's a hard market to target. It's hard to get in through hospitals, which have just low cost requirements. And so we decided this is great for everybody. I mean, there's tons of research for ginger on benefiting athletes, benefiting everyday people. So let's make this broader. And hopefully the people who need it for those serious medical reasons can still get it. And now they'll be able to get it more easily because it'll be everywhere. And so we worked on kind of redefining the brand a little bit, moving from what he had was a refrigerated product to a shelf stable product, which enables us to, again, scale much more easily. And so we kind of worked through that together.
What I'm curious, from when you first met Siwat, what was the reason that, number one, the connection was made? You mentioned the branding, but why did you really feel like this was something you wanted to be involved with?
So for me, I had been, after business school, I did innovation at Unilever, along with some other brand roles. So I was a brand manager at Unilever and then a brand manager at EOS Products. But before business school, I had actually run an outdoor retreat center for the YMCA. So I had very much been in the kind of wellness, fitness space, working for a nonprofit, very passionate about what I was doing. And I loved the work I did in kind of the big corporate CPG, but it's different. So the idea of me going to a startup is not crazy and was very much like something that I could have predicted a while ago. And so I wanted to work on something that I was, really able to mold and have control over all the different pieces and build the brand and build the formulas. I loved that part of it, from a creative side. And then just from a passion side, being able to create something that helps people feel better and has a positive impact was so personal for me. I was a college athlete. I did the women's decathlon. So I did 7 track and field events.
Wow.
And so I had shin splints for like years.
Yeah. Wow.
What was your favorite event?
I loved high jump and javelin, but high jump has my heart for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was always
delayed
training.
onset muscle soreness. All those.
Oh my
events.
goodness. Yeah. All the jumpers, we just had ice packs taped to our shins all the time. And I got an ulcer when I was 20 from taking too much ibuprofen. Because that's, the trainers was 800 milligrams a day or whatever it was. And so when I learned the benefits of ginger,
try adding a 1 to that. I was on 1,800 milligrams a day when I played college football of ibuprofen.
Oh my goodness.
And I was on antibiotics every day for a different thing. So that can totally relate to that sidebar.
Wow. Yeah. It's crazy what they put kids through, college kids through.
It's just so short-sighted, go for the immediate fix with no thinking about the long-term consequences of, what you're actually doing to your body, which is crazy. Again, sidebar, but just blowing my mind that you two both have been through that experience.
Yeah. Well, that was when I learned later about the benefits of ginger as an anti-inflammatory. And so that was also really appealing to me, coming from, I'm still an athlete. I'm not quite at the same level, but I kiteboard and I surf and I do all sorts of stuff. So I'm still sore a lot. And to have ginger as a remedy instead of, reaching for ibuprofen all the time was also really interesting to me. So there were a few different pieces that were coming together. There was my desire to do something that was really passion driven and personal. There was my background in fitness and wellness and athletics. And then just meeting Siwat and feeling like this is someone that I trust as a good person and is going to do the right thing. And he's got something really cool that I see great potential with. Yeah. And so those all came together at a time in my life where I was ready to take a leap and try something different.
Susan, this to me seems like a very masculine framed category, right? When I think about sports beverages or hydration beverages. And it also seems like a category where we've convinced the majority of consumers that these beverages are healthy when most of them are not. So, talk about what is that core consumer for y'all? How are y'all different? How are you communicating that? I mean, that's got to be an uphill battle with some of these very large entrenched, I would say competitors of the beverage that y'all are bringing to market.
It is a very bro-y category. My first BevNet was 90% guys. I mean, it was just, there weren't even women in the industry, and any distributor, most of the buyers, it's guys, right? And it's a lot of the distributors, especially are guys in their 50s, 60s plus. And so they're like, oh, ginger, I have that with sushi sometimes. And you're sort of trying to educate that.
It's funny.
Cool, your daughter puts it in her smoothie. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's,
at least they've
an
heard
interesting
of it somewhere,
dynamic.
So
exactly.
I guess that's good.
Yeah.
But you're the second brand we've had on this is the only real North American market where people understand is sushi. So thank goodness sushi's introducing something good to people. So that's good. But sorry to interrupt. Let's get back to so how are you doing that differentiation within that hypermasculine category?
Sure. So our primary target is a female. It's a wellness, fitness minded millennial, and obviously Gen Z creeping up into being more and more engaged in this category and more important. We're focusing on that as well, but that's where we target kind of the boutique fitness world, the yoga, Pilates, the people who are spending $40 on a fitness class or $25 and are really investing in health and wellness. And what we see is actually millennial women are driving the functional beverage category because they're looking for more benefits. And so I should pull up my statistics before I start quoting them, but I did a deck recently for a retailer. It's a huge growing category or driver for beverage. And it's an area that as you mentioned, is sort of underserved and is ignored by a lot of these, hypermasculine brands that are coming out. So she is out there. She's looking for something that's natural or organic, that doesn't have added sugar. And for a lot of time, the beverage industry has been saying, oh, women, you care about calories, so we'll give you a 0-calorie version of whatever it is. Gatorade, for Gatorade Light or Gatorade G Zero, for women. Whatever. And and it's basically more chemicals. So, we've given her 0 calories, but not through anything good. So what we saw is most women who are athletes and who are engaged, they know you need a little bit of calories and natural sugars to help with the hydration process. It actually can help open the cell barrier. And so, she's not looking for 0. She's looking for something that's healthy and doesn't have a bunch of added stuff. And so that's what we're offering, is really a better for you version in this category that goes beyond hydration to deliver health benefits with the ginger.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And I want to make 2 comments and ask 1 question. Number 1, I really appreciate the way you're talking about your target consumer as a her. You're just saying like her. And I don't think I've heard anybody on the podcast so far.
No,
the way you're talking about it, it feels really personal and very intentional, which is just really interesting. Part 2, as you're describing this consumer, I'm having a really difficult time imagining, this well-intentioned yogi walking out of a really nice studio with a Glacier Freeze Gatorade, that picture just doesn't fit. So to your point, it really does feel like sending a brand that direction and targeting that consumer is a really great idea. Because to your point, that is a growing audience, and I don't anticipate that's going to change at all. Part 3, it's massive. Regen Brands podcast. How does the regenerative piece fit into all of this? When did that become a priority for Recoup? And how are you telling that part of this story?
Good question.
Sure. And that's, what we find is this consumer is on the leading edge of knowing about, what's healthy and what's good for you and what's good for the world. And so I'm sure your audience and that regenerative still building a lot of understanding and force in the ecosystem, right? People are still kind of trying to wrap around their heads around what exactly does it mean? What's the standard over here versus what's the standard over there? But what we find is our consumer is starting to perk up when she hears regenerative. She's looking for that, maybe not as a primary decision driver, but it's on the list and it's going to help move the needle when she sees it. And so for us, we made organic a priority last year. So we had a natural formula. We were actually 85% organic. So we were on the road, but we didn't have it fully organic until last year. We reformulated and we came out with our organic version. In doing that, we became aware that actually our primary ingredient, maple tree water, is this amazing renewable regenerative ingredient. And our supplier was actually Regenerative Organic Certified. And so there was an opportunity there to take a closer look at the brand and how we move forward and actually pursue that as a certification for ourselves. And so it was seeing that there's a shift coming. Whole Foods named regenerative as one of the most important factors, I think 2 years ago. So it's been flagged by the industry. It's still growing in terms of how buyers care about it or where they rank it. But we want to be on the leading edge of that because we think it's the right thing to do for the planet. And we think that the people that we serve and we care about the most are going to start to look for that.
This whole conversation gets me so excited for so many reasons. And I'm not on TikTok yet, but I know there's this trend where like, it's like blank girly, like I'm a blank girly. And you kind of insert like the health and wellness trend in front of that. Like that's in that younger female demo. And there's just such a burgeoning, I think, appetite for a product like y'all's. And we have to find a way to connect that to regenerative, which we have not done yet, right? So like inside our echo chamber, inside our bubble, inside the community that kind of already gets it, we all talk about it. But that's what we're trying to do with the podcast and these other kind of initiatives is, Kiss the Ground just put out their research that they surveyed 1,100 people and like 4% understood the significance of regenerative agriculture, right? But like 50 plus 70%, I forget, a large majority wanted to buy sustainably. They wanted to support the environment, but they weren't connecting that with those desires around environmental health, personal health. And that's basically what this whole coalition of brands has the opportunity to do. How are y'all doing that, Susan? How are you activating that at retail? How are you activating it on social? I mean, how are you telling that story?
So we're still early in our journey. So I can't say that we're the shining example of how to tell the story, but what we're doing is starting the conversation with retailers. For some retailers, I think it actually has been a door opener, and it's hard to get cross-category activation. So the dream would be sure to get a bunch of regenerative brands together. Coming from working on Dove and having this mega brand with multiple categories, it was hard for Dove to do it, and they own aisles. So I don't know if that's the way that we're going to get it to happen, but whether it's signage with individual products or whether it's small groupings in a category, I think there's an opportunity to get retailers to tell the story a little bit more. Wegmans, for instance, has a regenerative organic farm that they run, and that's sort of it's separate from where I think their category buying decisions make, but it shows that they're in the space and they're interested.
Yeah. Right. I did not know that.
I didn't know that
they like using that produce and like selling it, or is it just something that's like a for fun project? I can't imagine that's the case if Wegmans is doing it. No,
I don't know
Wegmans,
the scale at which I think it's local in their in one of their New York areas where they are headquartered. And so they just have one right now, I think, but maybe there's a plan to have them, in every region. I'm not sure, but it shows that they're acknowledging the space and they're getting involved in the space, which is important. And so I think for us, it's a matter of as we build our brand, telling that story along the way, seeing if we can get signage, if we can try to bring that together in terms of weaving the story for retailers and then to consumers. And then for us, it's also people understand regenerative in different ways. And so whether you talk to them about pollinators and the importance of bees and butterflies and having pollinators survive and thrive in the wild, there people are starting to get that conversation. And so linking it to regenerative can be a way to deepen the understanding and build the narrative. And that's one of the things that we've done with our pro-pollinator stance. So we actually removed honey last year, and we have done some donations to build and to rebuild habitats for pollinators. So that's a part of our mission.
That's really cool and interesting. I want to dive deeper into the honey piece, but before we go there, I want to acknowledge one of the things you mentioned about signage. Anthony and I couldn't help but smirk because that is an initiative that is very near and dear to our hearts. Something that we are actively working on behind the scenes, and we feel like it's a critically important piece for consumer awareness that does not exist today for regenerative agriculture. So it's something we're really trying to solve. So couldn't agree with you more there. Part two, Anthony hates it when I do this because I get really into like, what is the regenerative aspect of the product? I want to learn more about maple water. how and
Yeah,
why
for
that's
sure.
regenerative, and the benefits of
Yeah.
maple water and why that's your number one ingredient.
Sure. Maple water is another really incredible ingredient. So maple water and ginger are kind of the two heroes of our product. But basically, when you tap the trees to make maple syrup, what comes out is sap, but it's a naturally filtered plant-based water. And if you take that, it has 46 bioactive minerals, nutrients, amino acids. It has electrolytes, and it's incredibly hydrating. There's actually research that it hydrates twice as fast as tap water. And so just maple tree water is an incredible ingredient.
Hold on, Susan, Susan,
Yeah.
When you tap the tree, like, so I'm thinking of sap, I'm thinking of maple syrup, and I'm thinking of maple water. Is there like a resin that comes out that turns into all those different things, or are you tapping the tree different places and different things come out? Like, what's the help me here?
That's a great question.
So what comes out is sap, and that is
okay,
the same as maple tree water. Yes, and then if you boil that down, it turns into maple syrup. And so I think I read it takes 60 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup.
But when I'm thinking of sap, I'm thinking of something that's thick, like a resin, almost like not a water.
Viscous.
So are you adding water to it to make it the water, or is that inaccurate?
It doesn't come out. Sap is like a broader term. So that can mean like really sticky stuff, or it can mean a more liquid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
you didn't know you were going to have to do a maple tree water, PhD level education today, did you?
Yeah. And then some brands sell the byproduct of basically the boiling down, which is like the excess water, is also sold off now in a more sustainable practice rather than disposing the water.
Got it.
Interesting. And is that the water that you're using there? Is that like, for lack
no,
of a
we're
better term,
using
like
we're using the sap. We're using the sap, which has the minerals and the electrolytes, and if you boil it off, then it's just sort of like distilled water.
Right. And do you have to add any other water, or is that the only water sources coming from that sap?
We're not going to go into all the formulation details of our product.
Okay.
The trade secrets are not going to be revealed.
Yeah, there's a little bit of proprietary stuff that I'm like, we could talk about.
Problem. We understand that.
Yeah, so not trying to get you to divulge what you don't want to. So thank you for drawing a line in the sand, because we will just continue to ask questions all day.
You're like, I want to make Recoup at home. What is the recipe?
Car and I are like, what's the address of the facility? We'll meet you there. We'll bring cameras.
And cans.
Okay.
But it's an incredible ingredient. And so our farm is certified regenerative organic. So they, obviously follow all the practices in terms of actual farming practices, paying fair wages, involving the community, and making sure that the holistic approach that is required for regenerative organic certification is followed. And so obviously there are different tiers and different certifications. Regenerative organic does focus on the social, the individual, and the planet, in terms of what the ethical requirements are.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm now like, I'm bought in. I'm sold on maple water. Love that's the first ingredient. And I won't ask you any more questions about how you make it. I promise.
But I would say we want to give you all a big congrats on first beverage line fully certified ROC, correct? I want to say that's what.
Yes.
So big congrats.
Yes. So very, very proud of that. Thank you. And we hope that that's a flag to others to start to look at this and really take it seriously. So we're proud to be the first brand that has it across our portfolio. There are some brands that Tazo Tea, for instance, did 1 or 2 organic or regenerative organic flavors. But for us, it's an important piece of the brand. And as we continue to innovate and as we launch additional versions, that will be part of our brand now. So we will look to be regenerative organic certified across new products as well.
And And does that sourcing go beyond the maple water? Like, are you looking to source regenerative organic ginger and, you know, other items in the supply chain? Like, what does that relationship look like with all of the other ingredients?
For right now, obviously we fit the criteria to be certified. We didn't change all of our suppliers for this certification, and so as we do additional rounds, we can look to see is there a better supplier in terms of what they offer and how they are, what criteria they're meeting. But we were already organic certified, and so most of our, if not all of our suppliers, were already at sort of a very high level of standards.
Right. Yeah, you're already using such great ingredients. Well, and I mean, there's probably the maple water is probably such a large portion of the total volume of the product that like that certification carries so much weight. So that totally makes sense. Just wanted to see, you know, what it's one of the challenges of these certifications for multi-ingredient products, right? Like for a single grain ingredient, it's really simple. I mean, I shouldn't say it's really simple. It's still hard, but when the entirety of the package is one ingredient, it's easy for that to be ROC certified. Versus, you know, a 3, 5, 10, 12, 20 ingredient product, it becomes far more complex. So it's interesting to hear. I think you're one of the first super multi-ingredient, shouldn't say super multi, but multi-ingredient products that we've had on that has the ROC certification. So it's really interesting to hear how that works.
Susan, I'm curious about, obviously, business decision, I'm assuming on the shelf stable piece, just because it reduces the logistics hurdles of needing it to be refrigerated, it extends shelf life. But I'm assuming from a merchandising perspective, you still want this beverage merchandised in the beverage set, in the cold set. You want it to be drank, cold, whatever the right word is. Like, talk to us about merchandising and that approach.
Sure. And that's, for us, it's telling that story of, we're a hydration and health beverage. So we live at kind of a combination of points. So we don't necessarily want to be sitting next to the Gatorade. We want to be next to the kombuchas and the functional beverages. And most of I would say our consumers see that no problem. It's ginger, it's healthy, it's going to do good things for me. And so they think of it in the functional beverage space, but it's explaining that to the guy who has ginger with sushi and, you know, is maybe not my key target. So it's always an interesting conversation and trying to get the retailers to see you in the right light. Mostly it's gone well, and we are in the cold case in almost all of our retailers right now, but we're still working on getting into some larger retailers. And so that will be an ongoing conversation of proving our worth and proving that we're going to move faster than the product next to us in order to get that really valuable space.
And I know it's still early on the journey, but when I think about a product like this, I think like influencer marketing and e-commerce impressions like have a really high opportunity to move the needle. Like Regen beef, like I don't think you can influence or market that as much as a product like this, right? So it's obviously early days, but what are y'all thinking there? What have you tried there? Like, what do you see as a brand marketing person just in that space with this product?
For sure. I'd love to go big on TikTok. And we're starting this summer. We're going to do a wave for influencer marketing activation.
Nice.
Last summer, I hired someone for it. It wasn't the best hire. And so I feel like we didn't get as much movement from that. But summer is the beverage season. And so that's when we're going to lean into it a little bit more. We are on TikTok. We don't have a huge following on TikTok, but we're doing it. And we're on obviously Instagram and other social channels as well. But I do see TikTok as really a great place for brands to be able to get a lot of eyeballs without just having to pay to play. And Facebook and Instagram have become very much, organic reach is pretty limited there. So you're paying for ads. So hoping that we can unlock some things with TikTok this summer with an influencer campaign that we're working on. And then we're on Amazon. And so that's a nice add-on too, if we can incentivize some affiliate type of relationships to drive to Amazon sales, and then they get their affiliate percentage. So that's there's some great opportunity there, and I'm excited to invest more in that space.
Yeah.
I think that'll be super interesting. And I want to kind of bring it from there back towards retail, because I mean, there's this omni-channel approach these days, right? You had mentioned that sometimes it feels like retailers have these regenerative goals, but that doesn't necessarily reflect some of those buying decisions yet. So given you're the first ROC certified brand in functional beverage, what is some of the reception been as you make these retailer presentations? What do they like about the brand? What are they nervous about? Walk us through some of those conversations you've had.
Sure. For me, I think the Regenerative Organic Certification has helped open some doors or open some emails and gotten a conversation back where maybe I'd emailed that person before and didn't hear. So I'm grateful for that. I know that it's not going to be a make or break piece for them. We had a great retailer meeting about a month ago, and we're revisiting that, I think, next month to talk about the fall. So they're like, we love your product. We think the price point's great. We want to hear, what you're going to do to drive it off the shelf. And so that's for retailers, that's going to be the biggest concern. And so that whether it's influencer marketing piece or some of the drive to store type of marketing activations that you can do, that's where we just need to prove that even though we're a small brand, we raised capital, we have some money, we can activate and we can push people to drive to store where we have good turns in the retailers where we're currently selling. And so we can continue to drive and we're going to move it for you. So that's the biggest concern when it comes to retailers. We also, because we just got certified a few months ago, some of those conversations haven't happened yet. So I don't know how they'll go, but I do think that there's one meeting I have coming up in July that it was my regenerative organic email that opened and started the conversation. So, I think that it's helping us get a foot in the door, but then it's not going to move us onto shelf. It's just going to kind of help us be different and help us get noticed.
Yeah. Well, I think, so this is super interesting. I don't know if we've ever had another brand at your stage who's like presented to retailers without a regenerative certification and has now done this sort of second way of revisiting with certification. And I love what I'm hearing in that you're saying it has allowed you to start some conversations that previously were closed doors, right? So I think that's a really good signal for other startup regenerative brands. And two, like appreciate the fact that you're in the position you're in and kind of paving the way and sharing that story with our audience, because I think it's really valuable.
And I'm curious about, Susan, what you mentioned activation, right? It's beverage. This thing's got to turn to stay on shelf. Like that's a high turn category. So two questions. One, at retail, are they all being sold as singles, or are y'all like selling any multi-packs? And then two, what is the activation strategy? Is it very social heavy? Is it demoing? Like if it's a beverage, like what do y'all think is going to be the right plan there?
Sure. We are only selling singles. We're not selling multi-packs at this point. But if a retailer had an ask, I did hear recently from a retailer that multi-packs, for them at least, were starting to be a higher source of volume. And so you'll start to see that in the bottom of the cold case. You'll start to see 4-packs or 6-packs. But obviously, as a newer brand, it's a bigger hurdle to get someone to buy 4, right? You want them to try it the first time. So for us, being in singles is the way to start. And then in terms of how do you drive to shelf, I mean, depending on what your budgets are, and we're working with an okay budget, but not Coca-Cola money. Startup. Startup budget. So we're doing hyper-local advertising. And so as we get into more chain retailers, really focused on driving to store. And so there's even agencies that you can work with and ads that you might have started to see of like, get a free kelp burger. And you actually go to the store, you buy it, and the brand Venmos you back. And so there are tactics like that we will unleash when we hit some of those more key chains. And in the meantime, we're doing hyper local ads to try to build awareness in these pockets where we're already selling. And some of those people will buy online, but then when they're in the store, they're also going to have that brand recognition and brand awareness. So it's a little bit of a tactical spend in order to get some online sales, but build awareness in our target markets. So rather than just trying to sell all over the country online, I'm trying to sell online in our key areas with the most priority.
Smart.
And you mentioned key areas. From a distribution perspective, you mentioned bicoastal. Is the plan to kind of focus on those markets for now? Or are you looking to partner in a specific channel as like your go-to-market strategy? What does the distribution goal look like for Recoup?
Sure. So the natural grocer channel is our top priority. That's where we're going to move the most volume. We actually, for us, the fitness studios is a really nice strategic channel, and we sell really well there. We have great turns. It's, you go to your favorite boutique studio and you trust what they curate, whether it's, cool merchandise or whatever hair product. You kind of take them as an influencer and as a trusted recommendation. And so to be selling in there is a great way to build brand loyalty and brand awareness for us as well, in addition to making sales. So that's been a nice way to build out the brand for our key target in a meaningful way, but it's not where we're going to sell the most.
Right. But it's a great awareness play. I'm assuming it's probably a high margin play, but I'm curious from a distribution perspective, is that a huge hurdle? Is that all direct distribution? Are they buying from Amazon, or is there some other sort of distribution network that exists to service those kind of boutique-y fitness places?
We've been self-distributing on the East Coast since we started. We actually have just signed on with a larger distributor, and we're going to their retail show next week.
Nice.
And so we will be using that to kind of help us tip into some larger chains and then also reach a broader audience. But yes, for the boutique studios, we'll likely still be self-distributing, or there's Fair. Have you heard of Fair, the marketplace?
Yes.
Yep. Fair Wholesale.
Yeah, okay. So some of our wholesale customers that our studios buy from there. I don't think many have done Amazon business, but that's obviously an option as we get into places where they're beyond our reach. But right now it's sort of within driving distance for Siwat or myself is where we have the studio clients. And then there are some, like there's a distributor out here who will deliver to them once we kind of unlock.
My mind's immediately going to all these sauna places that are popping up now, because I'm a big user of those and I've lived so many places the last 3 or 4 years. And some of them I think do a decent job with retail products, but I can't think of a single one. And I've used double digits like consistently now in multiple geographies across the country that sells a hydration beverage, right? They might have a water tap. They might sell bottled water. But that to me seems like an underserved opportunity that might be less competitive than like a yoga studio or a gym. So curious if you've thought about that one.
I can't say that I'm on the sauna market as much as you. That's cool. I'd love to see your list of where you've gone, because yes, obviously of all the need states, walking out of a sauna is when any drink tastes the most delicious. So I think that'd be a great market. There's a studio out here called Breathe Degrees, and they're a breathwork studio, but they have cold plunge and sauna as part of the whole wellness routine. And we sell really well there. And they have a great online coaching program and things like that. So the breathwork space, the sauna and the cold plunge, they're definitely wellness trends that people are getting more and more into. And yes, I think there's a great opportunity for Recoup there. I didn't know that ginger actually helps with breathing as well, because it helps it helps relax the smooth muscles. So I was like, maybe it should be in breathwork studios too. There's so much research. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to breathwork. It's a total sidebar, but for those who haven't tried breathwork and maybe even breathwork curious, man, breathwork is a game changer. I've had some pretty incredible breathwork sessions in my life, and just wanting, first time it's popped up on the podcast, so want to give it its moment.
I went to a class. It was amazing. Really, really great. But I will say, as a sleep deprived new mom, When I try to do breath work, sometimes I do just fall asleep. So
Yeah.
I need to get the right routine so I don't just take a nap.
Yeah, I have. I used to be a free diver in California, and I was never very good at it. But I, for some reason, really enjoyed free dive training, doing breath holds, and I have multiple times fallen asleep with my breath held, to wake up like gasping for air in a weird way. So I hear you. It's a weird thing. Body does weird stuff.
Whoa.
Yeah. Nice.
Whoa.
We're way off topic now, though, which I tend to do this. Anthony, get us back on track.
No, this is great. This is great. Susan, I want to step back from the brand for a second, and I'm really curious. You've worked on some iconic brands, but like let's even take away CPG and let's just talk like regenerative agriculture, the regenerative agriculture movement, this lack of awareness. Like, as a brand expert, marketing expert, like where do you think that's at? Like what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? Like what do we need to do better? Like I'm super curious what you think of the overall like macro environment there.
It's interesting. I was thinking, obviously I wasn't around at the beginning of the organic trend or the non-GMO trend, but I imagine there'd be some good learnings to look back at how did those accolades come to grow into right now, where we have kind of USDA organic being the standard with a few other players, and multiple certification bodies, and then non-GMO project being the standard. And I actually don't even know what the rest of that ecosystem looks like. We are non-GMO projects verified. So we did that and then haven't looked back. But I think that right now there's obviously a very fragmented marketplace and fragmented understanding of it, and even definition of what it means. And I think that will coalesce over time and become more clear and more defined. And there will be certification agencies that rise to the top, and whatever their standard is will become what people understand. But even with organic, where it's been around for a long time, I mean, when I worked on EOS, this was 6 years ago, we have an organic line and a non-organic line. And I would do focus groups with people on what is organic and what does it mean. The average person can't define it very well. They're like, it's good. It means it doesn't have chemicals, I think, so there's still a lot of education that needs to happen. Even in these terms that we think, as people who are very embedded in the industry, we sort of take for granted that everyone understands that. Most people know it's good and it's more expensive, but the average person doesn't necessarily define it. Two people won't define it the same way. And so I think it's probably going to be a long time before regenerative agriculture has a very distinct understanding among the masses. I think what we'll see is people who are engaged in the planet and engaged in healthy living and what's ingredients that they put in their food will start to educate themselves and learn. And so whoever is the loudest voice is going to start to dominate the understanding. But there's going to be a long time before there's a general consensus.
I think it's a really good point. And I'm curious because we haven't had a lot of people on with your level of access to like running a focus group, right? That's like fairly unique for our typical guest. Out of all the blessing and the curse to me of regenerative agriculture is that there are so many different selling points, right? There's so many different positive attributes of regenerative agriculture. So pairing that with your perspective of having run focus groups before, which attribute or attributes of regenerative agriculture do you think will most broadly align with consumers and get them the most engaged in trying to understand what this relatively complicated system is all about?
It's always going to come down to what affects me, what affects that person.
Yep.
And so I would say how the ingredients are treated, or what is the result for the ingredients, is probably going to be the thing that is most important from the beginning. And so that's what people will start to understand. Okay, it means that it's farmed in this way, or it means that it doesn't have any pesticides, or whatever it is that is going to be most clearly understood. And then I think the people are becoming more engaged in climate change and more aware of that, and so that climate piece will rise to the top, and then the social piece people already understand. But I have a good friend who works for Fair Trade, and so I think that there's still a lot of people who they know fair trade is good, but they don't really know what that actually means. And so the ethical piece of regenerative agriculture and the people impact, people might say that's good. I like that it's good, but they're not necessarily going to know what the details are.
Right.
But along with anything, when it comes to what's going to affect me personally, what's going to affect my children, that's where the awareness is going to start. And that's probably where, if you're trying to spread the message and get people on board and to understand, that's the point you want to hit on first.
I totally agree. I asked that question hoping you would answer with that as you're leading these, both for my own personal validation and two, to see if your expertise lined up. And it's I think you're spot on, because it's not even passing the test. I mean, you have way more brand experience than I do. So really, if anybody passed the test, it's me, not you. So I think it's just really important that, it's a self-interested market. People care more about themselves than they do the planet, or their kids than about the planet. And that's not to say they don't care, but I don't think anybody's going to be like, oh, I'm going to do this for the planet, even though it's going to hurt me. You know what I mean? So if you can align both of those things together and start with that leading value proposition of this is better for me and is better for the planet, I think that's the right way to go. And it's just really good to hear that somebody with your experience, having worked for these large companies with all the marketing background and the branding background, feels similarly. That's just a really positive sign, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thanks.
The thing that's coming to mind for me is like two things, right? So Nielsen has some really cool data that they put out in 22, and it's basically like taking Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but kind of making it their own. And it talks about purchase drivers are what's it going to do for me and what's it going to do for my family. Those are the top two. And like, that's the largest majority of people like make purchasing decisions. And then more of those altruistic goals like climate or whatever are like really down at the bottom. And I don't see that changing. Right. And so I think us as a cohort of brands and as a unit or whatever, yes, we need to go create consumer demand for these products, but we're not going to do it by like throwing this term regenerative agriculture at people. We're going to do it by saying this product makes you skinny. This product makes you like perform better at work. Like this really easy to understand outcome or attribute is like what we need to lead with. And then inside the Trojan horse, once we've breached the city walls, we pull the regenerative agriculture out. Like that to me is the winning formula. And I've actually been spending a ton of time reading a book called Ramping Your Brand by Dr. James Richardson. And I don't know if everyone in the space agrees with him, but very like well researched. See Susan's got it right there. And like it's been really radically shifting the way that I'm thinking about this, and like how do we build individual and collective strategies as regenerative brands to like get the job done.
Yeah, I have it right there, but I haven't opened it in a year. So please don't quiz me on it. I think that that's true. It's people are going to buy. They're going to buy what tastes great and is good for them, and they think is cool, or whatever primary factor is driving that day, and they're going to do it for themselves. And then in an environment, hopefully, where they're choosing between a brand that meets their needs and is not regenerative, and a brand that meets their needs and is, they're going to start to look at those other factors. Yep. And so I think that, we need to be able to have the brands in your house that you then say, hey, and guess what? It's great and it's regenerative. But then we also do need to build the awareness of what that term means and why it's important, because that's going to be sort of the little groundwork that gets laid.
For sure.
Totally agree. I want to take us to the future for Recoup. I know we've talked about some distribution goals and like that. Are there new products that you're hoping to launch? Maybe new flavors? I don't know if it's to the point where we can talk about new categories at this stage or not. But the name Recoup to me is broad enough to say that like the play could eventually be multi-category. So curious to get your thoughts on the future.
Yes. And for me, as someone who loves innovation, if I could just do that all day, that would be my dream. Because it's just, I love creating products. I love looking out at the market and seeing what the white space is and building off of consumer needs and flavor formulation and all that sort of stuff. But the, business school person in me knows that when you move into a different category, you're basically starting another company. And so there's an awareness of, we're small, we need to be focused. As much as I would love to do XYZ, we can't do everything. And so we need to focus on doing one thing well. In terms of innovation within our category, so we have piloted a sparkling can line. We piloted that last summer. We won an award from the Specialty Food Association for best functional beverage last year. For our resilience flavor, and we got into Erewhon. And so that was, sort of great approval in terms of this is an excellent product, and we're excited to relaunch it, reintroduce it. It wasn't organic when we launched it, and so we would launch it in an organic and certified regenerative organic formulation, and so that is upcoming, and that's going to be our next big thing. And then other categories, Susan, I won't get into yet.
Other than the carbonation, are there any other significant differences? Like, does that have caffeine, or is it pretty much the same formula but with carbonation?
So I won't spoil what the functional benefits are, but we did add in some additional functionals to differentiate the flavors and to add additional benefits.
Cool.
I'll save that for
I want
lunch.
to guess, but I won't. Yeah, I was going to say, we'll leave it at that. That's super exciting, though. As we all know, carbonated is blowing up right now. So I think that's a really smart play. And to your point about, a new category, RTD, at least there's a little bit of recognition that can weave between non-carbonated and carbonated. So I think that's a really smart play. But also I just want to kind of use your background. You love innovation. You love identifying white space. If you were to start a brand new regenerative brand today, from a category white space perspective, where do you see the opportunities to innovate?
I mean,
these were not on the list that we sent over to prep you, were they, Susan? Some of these questions.
I apologize.
No, it's interesting. I guess the question, I would frame that question as find the white space, make it regenerative. It's not like there's regenerative white space per se, because for the consumer, that's not a thing yet. So it would be, where would I want to launch a brand and then make one of the factors of it to be organic and be regenerative would be important to me. I'm sure there's byproduct of every single thing that's manufactured that could be repurposed and could be something, but I don't know if that's going to be compelling for the consumer. And so, where is there an opportunity to build them something that is really interesting that also happens to be regenerative? I think a great brand that's out there already that I know you're familiar with is Cluster Bucks, and I think that's a really cool example of a product that I would never have thought of, but is built, inherently regenerative and is delicious and is desirable for consumers because it's meeting the needs of a healthy snack, and it, even though it's an ingredient profile that people wouldn't have asked for, because it's crunchy and because it's delicious, it's going to be a hit.
Yep. Shout out to Emily and Little Bucks. The great work with Cluster
Little
Bucks.
Yeah.
Susan, I'm going to take us home with our last question, which we've talked probably a little bit about, but just giving you the chance to add anything we haven't discussed, which is, how do we get Regen brands to have 50% market share by 2050?
That was on the question prep, and I don't know if I came up with a good answer for it.
You're not getting graded, so that's the good thing.
Yeah. I think that is a great goal. I don't know if that's a realistic goal. If you just look at what That's the realist in me.
That's fair.
If you look at the trend with organic, I think there's a really good example to look at, and I think that what you'll find is people will care more and more. The climate piece will become more and more important and part of that conversation, and so there's a really compelling angle there. But there needs to be more consensus on what it means. And so a better communication out to the masses of what it means, and a better communication of why should they care? Why should I care when it comes to that? And so it doesn't hurt to have everyone talking about it, because it's building buzz and it's getting people to type it into a search bar and start to understand. But it's important as you want to actually grow the market, to have it be clear that it's XYZ and it's important because of X. And so that is still early, and that still has a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure. That 50% would have to be made up of an inclusive definition of regenerative, for sure. That's probably pretty still broad. And I do think it would have to include a spot at the table for some of the largest food and beverage companies to claim regenerative that maybe isn't fully ROC or as regenerative as other people. But I don't ever see a world where we have regenerative products that are accessible to non-premium, non-affluent customers, unless we make that attainable for those brands and those operators, and probably if they're regulated into it, which I do think is coming for a lot of those publicly traded companies from a climate disclosure perspective. But it'll be interesting, right? Is that just then lower carbon, or is it regenerative? Is it climate smart? Is it regenerative? Like there's a lot of very nuanced, complex discussion to be had here that unfortunately we try to break down into very, very simple conversation when it really isn't. But I think what you said was spot on, and there's just a lot to be talked about in terms of that topic.
Yeah, and so I worked for Unilever after business school, and they do lead the charge in terms of big multinational CPGs on a lot of sustainability fronts. And so maybe it is getting someone like them who has an appetite for doing the right thing to embrace regenerative and to help tell that story, because it's hard for small brands to shout it out enough. I'm trying to tell 6 other stories along with it. And so to have some big brands, some big companies behind it is going to help. But we need to make sure that their version is going to be a version that it meets the criteria.
Has integrity. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think you're both right. And I think if you look at the history of how the big CPGs have operated, they have taken the success stories out of natural channel and learned how to amplify those stories, right? So the more we can get successful startups to learn how to tell the story the right way, Susan, to your point, maybe to work together to amplify that message, I think the faster we can get some of the larger CPG conglomerates to adopt that messaging. But it really has to be I think the onus falls on the startups to prove the concept. This can work, and we need to tell that story, and we do that by working together. So I'm excited to see where we go.
And the onus falls on people like Kyle and I to create more resources for that group of startups that are not as well resourced as they need to accomplish that, and that's exactly what we're doing. So I'm excited.
Yes,
about that.
I think one of the things we had talked about in the past was what could you guys do, or what could the ecosystem do to help support startups? And so obviously, buying regenerative products is really important, and then helping funding regenerative brands. And so that's my own little shout out for we're raising capital. If there's someone who hears this podcast that is interested and wants to learn more about that, please reach out to myself or to Siwat. But there are a lot of brands doing amazing things in this space, and not all of them will survive. And so if you like the space and you like their products, be it an ambassador, be a supporter, and move the needle with the purchases that you make.
Totally. On that
said.
point, we don't do a great job of doing this every episode. For the consumers who are listening today who want to try Recoup, where can they find your product?
Yeah, for sure.
The easiest, quickest way would be on Amazon Prime. You can get our variety pack. And so search for Recoup Beverage. And
that's RECOUP, correct?
Yes. RECOUP.
Nice.
And then if you're in the Northeast, we're in a lot of the natural and independent stores in the New York City, tri-state area as well.
Awesome.
Hopefully coming to a massive chain near you soon.
Yeah. This was amazing, Susan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to chat with you. Thank you so much for the great questions and really interesting space. We're so excited to be a part of this movement, and thank you for all that you do to support it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Great to have you.
Thank you.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our Regen recaps on the website. Regen recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.